I came home early because I missed him. That was the unbearable part. I had cut my conference short, driven 2 hours from Chicago in the rain, and walked through our front door thinking about surprising Blake with dinner reservations. The living room smelled wrong the second I stepped inside. Something floral and unfamiliar layered underneath the scent of our house. I called his name once, softly. Then I heard the creak of our bed upstairs. My legs carried me up the stairs like they belonged to someone else. I stood in the doorway and saw my husband of 9 years, laughing, tangled with a woman I recognized from his office Christmas photo. On the nightstand beside them, bank statements showing our joint savings gutted to $4,000, a lease for a secret downtown loft in his name, a paternity test confirming he had fathered a baby girl, and a gambling app screenshot showing $187,000 in losses. Blake looked at me. He didn't move, didn't reach for the sheet. "Nora," he said, "you're supposed to be in Chicago." I tasted salt. I hadn't even realized I was crying. Everything we had built together collapsed in the space of 3 heartbeats. I didn't scream. I turned around, walked to the guest bathroom, locked the door, and was sick until my stomach had nothing left. When the shaking slowed, I opened my voice memo app and recorded everything I had just seen. Every document, every number, every detail, while the images were still sharp in my mind. Then I texted my best friend Nora, "Come over now, don't tell anyone." She arrived in 18 minutes. I played the recording, her face drained of color. "He's been planning to leave for months," she whispered. "Then I'm planning my exit first," I said. Blake was in the shower upstairs, singing, actually singing. Mara stood guard in the hallway while I photographed every document on that nightstand. The last photo I took was of a baby ultrasound tucked inside his wallet. Something cold and unbreakable settled into my chest like a stone dropping into still water. I was done grieving. I was starting to work. That night, Blake came downstairs, kissed my cheek, and asked how the conference went. I smiled and said, "Fine." Then I went to bed early. When his breathing went steady beside me, I slipped into his office and logged into the home server he assumed I never touched. I downloaded every financial spreadsheet he had ever created. One file, buried inside a folder labeled Taxes 2023, showed monthly transfers of $8,000 to an offshore account, consistent, deliberate, hidden in plain sight for 2 years. The next morning, I called in sick, drove to the public library, and opened a brand new email account under a name that wasn't mine. I started building a timeline on a fresh document. Every lie Blake had ever told me, now with timestamps attached. Every single one had a paper trail. He had been careful, but not careful enough. Mara knew a divorce attorney named Elena Voss. In Harborview, Elena was known for one thing: she never lost when the other side played dirty. Elena listened to my voice memo without a single change in expression. Then she set down her pen and said, "Marital fraud, asset concealment, probable tax evasion." She said it the way a doctor names a diagnosis: calm, certain, ready to treat. We freeze everything quietly. No confrontation yet. I signed the retainer that afternoon. Elena's first instruction was to act completely normal for at least 2 weeks. Give him nothing to react to. Let him feel safe. I bought a burner phone. I installed a hidden camera app on an old tablet and positioned it on the bookshelf facing the couch. That night, Blake took a client call in the garage. When I reviewed the footage later, I watched him pace and laugh and tell someone on the other end, the wife still has no clue. I saved the file in 3 separate places. The call from Blake's mother came on a Wednesday morning. Diane had knitted me a Christmas sweater every year for 9 years. She called me the daughter she never had. I had believed her. She called to chat, and somewhere in the middle of the conversation, she said casually, "Blake mentioned you two are thinking about moving to the city soon. I'm so excited about the new baby." I went completely still. Diane knew. She had known for months, possibly longer, and had sat across from me at holiday dinners and birthday lunches and said nothing. When I pressed her gently, she stuttered, said she had misunderstood something, and hung up. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the wall. Blake had betrayed me. His mother had let it happen. The people I had trusted most had looked straight at me and chosen the lie. Something that had still been soft inside me finished hardening for good. I stopped sleeping in our bed. I told Blake I had developed insomnia and moved to the guest room. He accepted it without question, which told me everything I needed to know about how far gone we already were. Elena had been busy. She discovered Blake had forged my signature on a home equity line of credit worth $120,000. Half of it was already spent. She filed emergency motions to freeze our accounts without alerting Blake. The bank complied. 2 days later, Blake came into the kitchen furious, his debit card held up like evidence. "Why is this being declined? There's a glitch or something." I looked up from my coffee. "Maybe call the bank?" His face went from red to purple, but underneath the anger, I saw something I had never seen on Blake's face before: fear. It looked good on him. Blake's girlfriend, Cassidy, 26, junior accountant at his firm, had started texting him constantly from a number I had already screenshotted weeks earlier. One message said, "When are you telling her? Lila needs her daddy home." I forwarded the entire thread to Elena without a note. Then I created a private account and followed Cassidy on Instagram. Her profile was mostly unlocked. I watched her stories, prenatal appointments, nursery paint swatches, a tiny white onesie laid out on a bed. Each photo felt like a fresh cut, but each photo also went straight into my evidence folder. Blake had made promises to her too, made her believe she was the real future. Meanwhile, he was draining money that belonged to all 3 of us. He hadn't protected either of us. He had only protected himself. And that protection was almost gone. Blake's company, Pinnacle Financial, was planning its 10th anniversary gala. I was still on the official guest list as his wife and +1. I decided to attend. Not to cause a scene, not to confront him publicly, just to watch and to move one final piece into place before the board fell. Elena had uncovered something significant. Blake had been quietly redirecting client funds into the same gambling accounts for almost 2 years. The paper trail was thin in places, but it existed. It was enough. I compiled the strongest documents onto an encrypted USB drive. I mailed it anonymously to Pinnacle's internal ethics hotline, marked Concerned Employee. Then I pressed the gown that Blake once said made me look unforgettable, deep emerald, fitted at the waist, and hung it on the back of the guest room door. I had a party to attend. The gala was everything corporate events always are. Open bar, forced laughter, name tags, speeches that ran too long. I smiled at colleagues, accepted compliments, and let people tell me how wonderful I looked. Blake drank too much too fast. By 9 o'clock, he was leaning on a colleague's shoulder talking about big changes coming like a man who believed his own story. At 9:42, 2 men in plain suits entered the ballroom and walked directly to Blake's table. One leaned down and spoke quietly in his ear. Blake's face turned the color of old ash. He stood up, straightened his jacket with hands that weren't steady, and followed them toward the exit doors. I lifted my champagne glass and took a slow sip. Across the table, Mara caught my eye. We needed neither of us. Blake came home just before sunrise, smelling like whiskey and sweat, looking like a man who had not slept and was not going to. "They're investigating me," he said. His voice cracked on the last word. "Someone sent them everything." I set down my coffee mug. "That's awful. Who would do something like that?" He started pacing. He needed me to be his ally, his backup, the loyal wife who would stand beside him and help him explain away what couldn't be explained. "We're in this together, right?" he said. "Nora, we're a team." I looked at him for a long moment. "We haven't been in anything together for a long time, Blake." His face crumpled. Real tears followed. He sank into the kitchen chair and put his face in his hands, and I watched him cry without feeling a single thing except an enormous, quiet calm. 3 days later, Cassidy appeared at our front door. She was 7 months pregnant, visibly exhausted, wearing a jacket that strained at the buttons. She asked for Blake. I told her he wasn't home. Then I opened the door wider and offered her tea. She came in. She sat at my kitchen table, the same table I had shared with Blake for 9 years, and she talked. She told me Blake had promised to leave me before the baby came. He had promised her a life. He had promised her everything. I let her talk. My phone was recording on the counter beside the kettle. When she finished, I said quietly, "He lied to both of us, but you still have choices." She left, looking shaken. I sent the audio to Elena within the hour. I didn't feel angry at Cassidy. She had been used the same way I had, just from a different angle. Blake tried one final move. He filed an emergency custody motion claiming I was emotionally unstable and dangerously paranoid, this despite the fact that we had no children together. He submitted medical documentation to support it. Elena discovered the documents were forged within 48 hours. The judge reviewed the motion for approximately 10 minutes before throwing it out entirely. Blake's attorney looked like he wanted to disappear through the floor. I walked out of the courthouse with a restraining order signed and folded in my bag. The afternoon sun was warm on my face. I stood on the courthouse steps and let myself smile, not because I had won exactly, but because I started this with nothing but a voice memo recorded in a guest bathroom while my legs were still shaking. Look how far that recording had traveled. Pinnacle Financial let Blake go quietly, but quietly in Harborview still meant 3 local business blogs ran the story by the end of the week. His name circulated through professional networks with the word embezzlement attached to it like a permanent shadow. Old colleagues stopped returning his calls, networking contacts went silent, invitations dried up. Then Diane called me. She was crying, the deep, ragged kind of crying that means something has finally broken through. She said she was sorry. She said she should have told me. She asked if there was any way to repair things between us. I listened to the whole thing without interrupting. Then I said, "I forgive you, Diane. I really do. But I don't want you in my life anymore." I blocked her number before the screen had time to dim. Forgiveness, I had learned, doesn't require proximity. Elena had moved quickly in the early weeks of the case. Blake's name had already been quietly removed from the beach house deed based on the documented fraud, the forged credit line, the concealed accounts, the asset transfers. The sale went through faster than I expected. I paid off the fraudulent line of credit entirely and still walked away with enough to begin again. I found a loft downtown, bright windows, high ceilings, morning light that came in at an angle that felt almost intentional. The building address was, by complete accident, the same one where Cassidy had lived before she moved. I stood in the empty apartment the first afternoon, listening to the city outside, and laughed until my eyes watered. Sometimes life has a sense of humor. You just have to survive long enough to appreciate it. Blake filed a defamation lawsuit against me, claiming the anonymous ethics tip had destroyed his career and that I was responsible. Elena walked into that courtroom carrying a document box that required 2 trips from the car. The judge took one look at the financial fraud evidence, the forged offshore transfers, the forged signatures, the asset diversions, the gambling losses, and dismissed Blake's case before lunch. Then she ordered Blake to pay my legal fees in full, $47,000. Blake sat at the plaintiff's table looking at the ruling like a man reading his own obituary. He had nothing left to pay with. He had spent years hiding money from everyone, including himself, and now there was nothing hidden anywhere because there simply was nothing left. Elena shook my hand outside the courtroom doors. She said, "Done." That one word covered everything.
Lila was born on a Tuesday. Blake didn't go to the hospital. He was living in a motel near the highway, fielding collection calls, waiting for court dates. Cassidy delivered their daughter without him in the room. I thought about that for a while, not with satisfaction, just with a kind of sorrow for the baby who hadn't asked for any of this. I put together a care package: diapers, formula, a soft blanket in pale yellow. I included a handwritten note that said, "You didn't deserve what he did either. You've got this." I left no return address. No reply came. I hadn't expected one and didn't need it. Some things you do because they're right, not because they'll be acknowledged. Lila was innocent. That was the only fact that mattered. 6 months after the divorce was finalized, I launched my own digital marketing consultancy. My first contract came from Pinnacle Financial. Their new board had heard about me. Apparently being the one who saw through everything was now a professional credential in this industry. They offered me a retainer at triple my previous salary. I signed it on a Monday morning, sitting at my desk in the downtown loft, coffee cooling beside my keyboard, harbor visible through the window. Every day I walked along the waterfront before work, the same harbor Blake and I had looked at from the beach house deck during the first years of our marriage, when I believed he was exactly who he said he was. The water looked the same. I did not. I walked faster now. I stood straighter. I took up the full amount of space I was entitled to. It turned out that was quite a lot. I saw him at a charity gala 8 months later. Blake was thinner, hollow around the eyes. He was moving through the event with a tray of drinks as part of his court-ordered community service hours, and for a moment neither of us moved. Our eyes met across the room. He looked away first. I turned back to my table and my date said something that made me laugh. Genuinely. Freely. The kind of laugh that rises up without permission. I laughed until I had to press my hand to my chest to catch my breath. Later, I stood on my balcony in the night air. City lights scattered below like something spilled and beautiful. I thought about the woman who had climbed those stairs 9 months ago, on someone else's legs, heart cracking open in a doorway. I spoke to her quietly, into the dark. "You hid everything to break me," I said. "Instead, you set me free." The sweetest revenge was never his destruction. It was this. Standing here, thriving so loudly that he could not escape the sound of my joy.